Hello, it's Kimmy Searches, and we're going to talk about the books that I read in March, finally. So let's just jump right into it. The first one that I read was Children of the Jedi by Barbara Hambly, I think is how you say that. So this book is about Leia, Han, Chewie, and R2, who discover cryptic secrets while searching for the long-lost children of the Jedi on the planet Belsavis. Meanwhile, Luke and C-3PO must destroy the Death Star prototype on which they're trapped before it destroys them and Belsavis. This was a super fun book until the end, which we will talk about. I thought the plot was really good. The mystery aspect of it was super interesting. Of course, everything that Han and Leia are finding on Belsavis is somehow connected to the Death Star prototype, the Eye of Palpatine. It's also like there's a super funny aspect to it where the Eye of Palpatine was supposed to have a mission 30 years ago, but it was tampered with and stopped before it could do that, but not stopped completely. So the whatever was supposed to trigger it to start never happened. So it's been waiting all this time to start its mission. And so finally something triggers it and it does start its mission, and it was supposed to pick up stormtroopers on all these random planets. And instead of picking up stormtroopers, it picks up like these random creatures from all these random planets. And it's pretty hilarious because they're all on the ship and they all think that they're stormtroopers because they're pushed through a brainwashing process. And it's pretty hilarious. I mean, there are all kinds of creatures who are like just running rampant on this ship, and Luke not only has to stop the ship, but he also has to stop all of the creatures from killing each other or themselves, and from dismantling the ship before he can get everything sorted out. And it's funny, it's interesting. There's a really good sense of struggle and like a deadline that they have to accomplish everything by. I think the pacing is really well done in this book. I just hated the ending so much, but otherwise this was ready to be my favorite Star Wars book I've ever read. It was funny, it was interesting, it had an excellent mystery aspect to it. The things that Leia and Han were discovering were super interesting and weird and scary almost. They run into these zombie creatures on Belsavis, and they're trying to discover what happened to them because they were people that used to live on Belsavis, and they don't know how it turned them into these monsters. And that's one of the things I didn't like that never went explained, and neither did some things about the Eye of Palpatine. And I wish it had been explained a little, but it might be explained in books 2 and 3 of the Callista series, Callista trilogy. I don't know. At the moment, I have no plans to read the next 2 books because I hated the ending so much, but they might be explained there. So that may be a complaint that is totally unfounded because they are fully explained later on, but I'm not sure. As of the first book, it leaves some plot holes that I thought, they're not exactly plot holes, they're just things that I wanted to know that I didn't get to find out because they didn't talk about that in this book. They just kind of skimmed right over it. So if I read the other 2 books, it's solely going to be to find out what the deal was with the zombie creatures on Belsavis, because that's just completely overlooked, and I really want to know what happened to them. But aside from that, this book was so good. The other thing I didn't like is going to be spoilery, so I'll just say, if you're really into Star Wars, if you're really into mysteries, this is a really good book. It's got the Star Wars humor to it. It's got a mystery to it. I really like it. I don't think anyone else will like this book because if you're not really into Star Wars, you're not going to care about this at all. So I'm just going to jump right into the spoilers now because I have to talk about this. I have to get it off my chest. It's called the Callista series because The Eye of Palpatine, like I said, was supposed to start 30 years ago. A Jedi named Callista got into the ship and she managed to destroy enough of the triggering mechanisms to where she stopped it from ever starting. And then she died on the ship. She ended up transferring her consciousness into the ship so she could protect it from anyone coming to start the mission, and she could hopefully keep everyone away from it. Well, Luke ends up managing to get onto the ship, and she works with him to try to destroy it. They know each other for less than a week, and they fall in love. I hate it when that happens. I hate authors that do this. I cannot stand that. I don't believe those relationships at all. Like, I don't care how well they mesh together. I have met people that I thought were going to be my friends that I didn't get along with after a week. Like, I can't even imagine meeting someone for like 5 days and being like, we're in love. Like, that is not how this works. I'm sorry. That's not, and especially because they're both Jedi and they're both supposed to think like logically. I know a lot of what their training is like emotional and trusting their instincts, but there is a point where they have to step back and go, all right, like, that doesn't make that much sense. Maybe we should think about this, but they don't. So they're in love, and it's very unbelievable. Another unbelievable part is Luke gets injured on the ship pretty early on, and the entire rest of the book is that like next week or so, and he keeps saying like he's used all his strength and he doesn't know if he can go on anymore, and he's trying to use the Force to like take care of his injuries and at least to keep the pain at bay and infection or whatever at bay. But then he'll say like that he doesn't have any more strength and he doesn't know if he can do it anymore, and he's used up too much of his concentration or whatever, and he can't do it anymore. And then suddenly like he finds a way. And I don't know how much of that is Luke being like a drama queen, as he is sometimes known to do, and how much of that is like he really has used up all of his strength. That might just be me. But parts of it are a little unbelievable. The part with Callista being the main thing. So here's like the main spoilery thing that I want to say about Callista. At the end of the book, it's fine until like the last 20 pages. The last 20 pages, Luke gets off of the Eye of Palpatine. He sends all the weird creatures home, and his friend was on the ship with him, and he was trying to find her on the ship. The friend ends up helping Callista like switch their consciousness. So Callista's consciousness is now in that lady's body, and the lady's consciousness is destroyed with the ship so she can be with her lover, who has also died. So when Luke gets off the ship, he thinks that Callista is gone, and so is everyone else. And then he finds an escape pod, and he's like, oh, thank God my friend made it at least. But then he opens it up, and he's like, this doesn't seem quite right. This it looks like my friend, but it doesn't look like my friend. You know what I'm saying? It turns out that it's Callista's consciousness in his friend's body, and that's what's weird. And like over time, she's going to look more like Callista, which I also hate. I think that's weird and doesn't make that much sense. And like, it just feels like if they could have done this all along, why weren't more Jedi doing this? You know, what are the rules for that? I don't know. It's just kind of weird, and I didn't like it at all, and I found it super aggravating. And Callista herself, I liked. I liked Callista. I liked the story with Callista in it. But her relationship with Luke moves really, really fast, and I don't like that. And it just kind of like jumps from one thing to another. Like Luke is just suddenly like, I'm in love with her. I've never met anyone like her. And I don't know. I just don't like it that much, especially because Callista's backstory if I were in Callista's place, there's no way I would ever like want to fall in love again. And like she's like totally backstabbed by a previous lover, and it has to do with the Eye of Palpatine and like how she got there and stuff. So if it were me, I would definitely be questioning myself if I happened to fall in love with the only man I have ever seen in the past 30 years. Like I definitely would be taking a step back and going like, you know, I haven't seen anyone in 30 years. It's only been cleaning droids. Maybe I'm not in love with him. Maybe I just haven't seen another human in 30 years. Just saying. Just saying. Like, it's too convenient, you know? I don't like that. And I'll stop. I'll stop now. I've gone on too long. But that's my thoughts on this. I gave this book 3 stars. It was going to be the best Star Wars book I've ever read, which that's from a very small pool. I haven't read that many Star Wars books, but I really liked it until the BS with Callista, and that's why I don't want to read the other 2 books, is because they're all supposed to be about Callista, and I fucking hate Callista now. So we'll see. I'll stop now. I'll move on to the next one. I'm sorry. So the next book that I read was The Municipalist by Seth Fried, who knows. This book I got from the Book of the Month subscription thing. I picked it because I was trying to go with a sci-fi themed month, so I grabbed this one, and it was interesting. It's not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like a Blade Runner, RoboCop type thing. I know RoboCop isn't very serious, but I thought it was going to have a more serious tone to it. But it was actually like a funny buddy cop story, so that was interesting. It's about a straight-laced, socially awkward bureaucrat who is teamed up with a narcissistic supercomputer to investigate a missing persons case. But they end up discovering a far more sinister plot that leaves them questioning everything they stand for. So, the human character is named Henry. He's very weird. He's has an obsessive interest in trains, and he doesn't really know how to talk to people at all. The supercomputer named Owen is hilarious. He's probably I think the saving grace of this book. If Owen wasn't in this book, this wouldn't be a good book. He's hilarious, he has a personality, he knows he's a computer, he's narcissistic, he's vain, he's a character. He's actually more of a character than Henry is. I think more people like Owen than Henry. Because Henry doesn't really seem to change much throughout the book. By the end, he's still like some super weird dude that doesn't know how to talk to people, which is fine. But Owen is more likable, and they end up becoming friends. The humor in this book is really good. The plot is okay. It's not like the best one. This is also not like my favorite type of book. One of the issues that I had with it was that it tries to balance between like a really funny, wacky buddy cop story and like a story that has a real meaning and depth to it and has something to say about like philosophy and the gritty reality that we live every day, about the way our cities work, and about how civilization works and how we take care of one another as humans. It's just, this book is too short, I think, to do that. It's not a very long book, and they try to cram 2 like completely opposite things into it, and I think it makes it a little awkward. It's overall enjoyable, but it gave me such an odd feeling afterwards that I wasn't sure if I actually even liked this book or not. I did give it 3 stars. I liked it, but I didn't like love it. It just feels really unbalanced. Like one of the big issues that they talk about at the end is like the issue of homelessness and how, you know, everyone should have what they need, which is fine, that makes sense. And they talk about how why the public services that Henry and Owen work for can't really do that. Like, there are too many consequences for them to provide everything they need for everyone. Basically, like, on one hand, we should help everyone, and everyone should have, the basic necessities of life. And then on the other hand, it's got the whole idea of, if one man gets something, then another man is just not going to have it, and that's how things work. There's like a realistic side to it and a like wishful thinking side to it. It would be nice, but is that realistic? Not sure. Especially with like government agencies. I don't want to get into like the philosophy of it and all of that, but they tried to like put this really heavy, gritty, real thing in at the end, and it just seems kind of weird. Just because the tone of the whole rest of the book is so like funny and like wacky, and yeah, they're trying to like solve a mystery and like turn in the bad guys, but the way they do it is crazy and weird because they've got Owen, who is a supercomputer, and he like can do funny go gadget style things. So I just think it's like a little odd. It's like the tone just completely changes at the end, and it's not like a funny buddy cop book anymore. It's like suddenly real and about people and how we function as a society and how maybe we should function as a society. And I think they should have backed off a little bit with either the philosophy stuff or whatever you want to call that, and the humor. Like, it should have been more one and a little bit of the other, not both as hard as they went. I think this book would have been way more successful if they tried to do like if they just threw in a little bit of the philosophy and politics at the end, just to give you like something to think about, something that can open up further discussion. But the fact that they tried to cram so much of it in, especially at the end, and especially with the characters that they decided to introduce that with, it just seemed a little odd to me. It seemed a little all over the place, and I didn't really like it, and I wasn't thrilled with how they did that. And I'll just talk briefly about the characters. Some of them are really aggravating. I think I said earlier that Henry is still kind of weird by the end of the book, which is fine, but that doesn't make him any more likable. Like, you'd hope that he'd learn how to socialize a little bit, so that way you could like really connect with him. But he kind of doesn't. He's still like this weird dude that I don't know. He's just kind of strange, and I still don't have like a strong connection with him by the end of the book. The characters that they use to show like the political side of this are very weird. The missing persons case involves the mayor's daughter, Laurie, and the like city planner. This is slightly futuristic, so like I can't remember what his title is, but it's basically like city planner. Like, he's involved in like, I don't know, making the city function really well, and he's like the head of that. And he's an older man, and Laurie is like a teenager, and they both go missing. And it turns out Laurie and the older man are like more involved in this like pseudo-revolutionary movement thing. Laurie is the most aggravating thing I've ever seen in my life. She's like the total stereotypical like teenager who thinks that she knows everything, and she's super arrogant, and like she's here to start a revolution, and you don't know what you're talking about if you disagree with her, and like she knows what she's doing. And it's just weird, and like the fact that she's teamed up with this older man, and like nothing they say seems credible because of their like relationship, because like you see them together and you're like, they're insane, they're like those trashy people that you see, and then they're like trying to move this revolution forward, and it just doesn't seem credible to me. seems extra weird. And it doesn't help that Laurie is this super annoying, weird teenage girl who thinks that she knows everything. I'm totally for teenagers, like, standing up for what they believe in and all of that. But when you're super arrogant about it and you think you know everything, and especially being so young, I think teenagers really have to be careful with the way that they present themselves with things like this that are very, like, complex and conflicting, because really a lot of people discredit teenagers as not knowing what they're talking about because they haven't experienced much life yet, and that's a fair point. A lot of teenagers, especially teenagers who try to say that they're here for a revolution, they don't know how cities work. They don't know how, the real world works or whatever, because they've done nothing but go to school their whole lives, and that's not like an accurate representation of how the world works. They may be really smart, they may know a lot of things, but they just haven't experienced much life. So they have to go into things with a more open mind, or at least with the knowledge that they don't know everything. I think that's fair. I think that's how teenagers should go into things. Even if they have strong ideals, they should be willing to listen and learn more. I think we all should, but particularly for teenagers, because it's so easy to just, think that they don't know what they're talking about, and it's so easy for them to come off as arrogant and like they don't know what they're talking about. Laurie is that. She's that girl that, like, clearly has no idea what she's talking about, really has no place to be doing this yet, and she seems like so silly about other things, and like she's not thinking other things through, that, like, it makes this whole issue with her revolution, like, completely confounded and, like, weird and annoying, and I hate it. So, like, to have her and this other man who's, like, totally willing to work with her, having them present the other side of the story is just a little weird. It seems like they're the wrong characters to pick to, like, if they wanted you to think about, like, morals and how cities work and how civilization works and how we as humans need to work together, then they're a weird character couple to present that with, because they seem like trashy people who don't know what they're doing. And if you want people to think about that kind of thing, you want them to hear it from, like, a credible source who knows what's going on, who doesn't make weird connections with teenagers. Like, I don't know, because it was like teacher and student, and then, like, they run off to start a revolution together. That's weird. That's not something that I think is a smart move. Anyway, it was good. It was just kind of weird, that, like, unbalanced tone of the book. It was just kind of strange. I'm not sure if I like that one. But like I said, I'm not super into this kind of genre anyway. I like sci-fi, but I guess I like more, like, action stuff and less, like, let's talk about nitty-gritty reality. Like, I don't like reading about, like, philosophy and stuff in my fun books. So this may just be me. This may all just be me, but that was my opinion of it. So I don't know. Take that however you will. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. If you're looking for just fun, you're not going to like this book. If you're looking for, like, just super serious stuff, you're also not going to like it. This is, like, a weird balance somewhere in between there. So do with that what you will. So the last book that I read in March, actually the book that I spent the majority of March on, was Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm sure this is a super famous book. It's considered, like, a masterpiece of the sci-fi genre. Here it is. It's about the far-flung future. So humans have spread out onto multiple planets, and they all survive, not because of, but everyone uses a drug called spice, and it helps them, like, function as a intergalactic race now. Spice comes from a planet called Arrakis or Dune. It's a desert planet. There's not a lot of water on it. The entire thing is a desert planet. Paul is the main character, and he is from a noble family who gains control of Arrakis. However, when enemies of Paul's family come in and start messing things up and causing havoc, Paul finds himself stranded on the deserts of Arrakis with his mother, where they must learn the ways of the desert people called Fremen and embrace his role as a messiah. This book, I could spend like 2 hours easily talking about this book, but I'm just gonna go over like basics, what I liked and didn't like about this book. There's a lot of world building in it, which is excellent. A lot of people really like it for the world building. I also like how many layers are in it. You can read this as a book about philosophy. You can read this as a book about ecology. You can read this as a book about all kinds of things. And so there's like tons of layers. It's super long. This was like 800 pages. There's a lot of things that you can take away from this book, and there's a lot of different ways you can interpret this book. You can read this book over several times and come away with a new interpretation, or read it with a different mindset every time. And I think that's why a lot of people like it. There's also like a ton of other books in this series. Like there's at least 8 Dune books, and this is how long the first one is. So I'm not going to read any more of it because I didn't love it enough. I found Paul to be very unrelatable, and he's kind of supposed to be. Paul starts out in the book as being 15 years old, but he is not only being trained to take over as the next Duke, his mother also belongs to a group called the Bene Gesserit, which are basically like space witches, kind of. They're an organization of women that are kind of modeled after like Catholic nuns, sort of, like, not exactly. They just kind of give you the same vibe. They are really into like control of your own body and mind, so they can do the whole like slow your heart rate and everything and put yourself into a deep sleep and then wake yourself up out of it or whatever. And the ultimate test for the Bene Gesserit is looking into yourself and changing chemical compounds of things in your own body. Like, that's the amount of control they have over themselves. And it gives them kind of like a super sense where they can read people really well and they can like hear things very well, all of that. Like, it gives them kind of like superpowers, which is why they call them occasionally witches in the story. And their main motive is, well, it's to kind of breed the noblemen of this world into creating like a supreme being. So Paul's mother is a Bene Gesserit. Paul's father is a duke. He's also, the mother trains him as a Bene Gesserit. They're not supposed to train men in the Bene Gesserit ways, but Jessica decides to start training Paul in the Bene Gesserit ways just to give him like a one-up. So he's being trained to be the next duke. He's being trained in the Bene Gesserit ways. He's also being trained to be basically like, there's also like this group of people called the Mentats, who are like, not only are they head security for noble families, but they can also be incredibly devious assassins. They're also considered like human computers, where they can like take all this information and calculate things and like figure things out very quickly, and they're very, very logical and rational. So he's also being trained in that way. He's has like the best weapons master ever teaching him how to fight and stuff. He's got like everything going for him, and the fact that he's like the chosen one of this story. So he's not supposed to be relatable. He's 15, but he has the maturity of like like Yoda or something, like an 800-year-old cryptic man or something. um, but it just makes the story a little harder to read, in my opinion, because of that. Just he doesn't even grieve for his own loss the way a normal person would. So like everything that happens to him is not gone through the way like normal people would, because he's supposed to be like a supreme being basically. That's why he's considered a messiah by a lot of the Fremen. And and the main story with him is he's trying to prevent a jihad, a holy war, from happening in his own name. And then he kind of has to struggle with knowing that, because so not only does he have this extreme control of his own body, he ends up being able to kind of see the future, sort of. He can see like different routes the future may take. So the book is mostly about him struggling with that, and I'm really not into that. I find it really odd. They spend a lot of this book like droning on and on about things. Like the first 200 pages I thought were super boring. The story, when it's happening, is really interesting. I thought it was really good then, but there's like these long passages between action where they just talk about political intrigue, or they just talk about Paul's like prescience or whatever it's called, and I'm just not a fan of that. Like they spend a lot of time talking about it, and I'm sure if you look at it from other angles with other things in mind, there's plenty you can take away from that. But I personally didn't want to. I don't want to read this book ever again. So I'm not going to be looking for other layers to it. I'm not going to be looking for other messages I can take away from it. So as far as like just the story, I didn't love it, is what I'm saying, basically. If you're really into like sci-fi, and I hear this is a huge hit with like teenage boys, so maybe that's the issue. I'm not a teenage boy. I don't know, because I am really into like Star Wars and sci-fi and stuff, but like this one just didn't speak to me as much. I guess I'm not really interested in like reading about like political things. I'm also not really interested in reading about like a chosen one who's like amazing at everything. So they're also talking about like ecology. I'm not interested in that, really. Not in reading 800 pages about it, I guess that's what I mean. They say you can look at this as a study of poetry, which I also can't stand. Like this is like everything that I don't like to read about in 800 pages. So I wasn't personally a huge fan of it. I think if you're like a casual sci-fi fan, or somebody who really wants closure in one book, you're not going to like this book. Another reason I didn't like this book is because the ending feels very unsatisfying. Like, the story closes, and you don't have to read the second one to know what happens, but it just doesn't feel satisfying. There are certain things that you're just like, well, that was just kind of weird, and I didn't really like that. And especially with Paul's conflict with this idea that he's a messiah, and with his ability to like see into futures, and the whole thing is him struggling with the idea of the jihad. And they just it's just kind of still a little open-ended at the end. Apparently the second one deals with that a lot more, and it deals with Paul as a character in a more interesting way, I think, than this one would. But I'm not going to read it because I spent a lot of time on this one, and I don't want to spend any more time on this. So I gave it 3 stars because I did like it, but I didn't love it. I could definitely see why it's considered a masterpiece in its genre, but it wasn't for me exactly. There's a lot of layers to unpack with this, which I think is one of the things that makes this such an excellent read. A lot of people try to say that like the story itself isn't very strong, And I could see why they say that, but I think the thing that makes this book so outstanding and such a masterpiece is because there's so much to unpack here. There's so many layers to it. There's so much you could read into and interpret differently. And I think that's what makes this book so, so good. However, as someone who is unwilling to unpack all of those things, that's also why I didn't love this book. Um, Not that I don't want to critically think about it. It's just all the things that I don't particularly care to critically think about. So that's why this book didn't speak out to me as much. I could definitely see why it would to other people, but in my opinion, it's not something I absolutely love. I would love to see other people's like essays or video essays about this book. I think that would be really interesting. But I personally don't want to be sitting here analyzing it. So that's just how that went. And I won't talk about this anymore because I will easily spend an entire hour just talking about that. So those are the books that I read in March. I know I only read 3, but Dune is super long and I wasn't thrilled with it, like I said, so it took me even longer to read. So there's that. I guess I'll see you if I ever do another video again in like another month. Thanks for watching, Acacia. I love you. And I'll see you next time.